Hi, welcome to the Aspire Career Exploration Series. My name is Nahid Casazza and I'm here with Mark Tyssee. Thanks for being with us today.
Sure.
Most people when they think about career success, they usually think about financial success, right? Your career is how you choose to make money during your life. And one of the things in your position, in your whole career, is that while you've had a variety of positions, they've all been the types of positions where you have a large opportunity to make a high income, and you've had a system where you've been able to be very successful in those positions. So I think I'd like to kind of span your whole career and the various different positions. I know you've owned some businesses and you've also worked for companies, so we might include all of those. But I'd like to maybe start way back in the beginning, when you were maybe in high school and college. And can you tell us a little bit about when you started thinking about what you might want to do as a career?
Yeah, I would say most of that sort of began with my first job when I was 15 and a half, and it was summer, end of my freshman year in high school. And I was woken up by my dad, and he took me down to the city of Costa Mesa for a job over there. So basically I was just trimming trees and on the lawn crew and doing things like that at the city. So that was my first job. And I recognized pretty early that I did not want to work a job like that for my whole career.
that is such a great example, because a lot of people have told me in this series that a lot of what moved their career forward is doing certain things, having a variety of experiences that they suddenly realize, oh my gosh, I don't like this. So if I don't like this, that makes it clear. Sometimes it's easier to know what you don't. So then you knew that you didn't want to do something like that. So then what did you start thinking about?
Well, I continued working it all through high school and actually ended up working there for about 4 or 5 years for the city. But the entire time, I was focused definitely on at what point am I going to get out of high school and into college. It all started pretty early for me in terms of really focusing on that. And then really from there, I always knew that I had a very broad variety of interests. So then in terms of deciding what I wanted to go to school for, I started thinking about going into business, because I knew that sports interested me, animals interested me, doing athletic training interested me. There were so many different things that interested me that I wanted to go and get a degree that I could go into whatever field that I chose to go in at that point in time.
And so somehow you figured out that if you went into business, you would still have the flexibility to maybe apply it to sports, or to apply it to animals, or to athletic training, or whatever you wanted to do. How did you know that? Was it
really, it was my senior year. I took a class in economics, and I had a great teacher for the economics class. So really, that kind of solidified that that is the field that I was going to go into at that point in time, and it was my senior year in high school.
Okay, great. You know, I hear this a lot too, that there's mentors or there's good teachers in people's lives that really tend to inspire you. Okay, so you decided you were going to go into business, and then what happened?
So then I went to Chapman University and started attending the university, and immediately started taking some of the business classes. And they had a fabulous faculty there, so really was able to get a lot of experience early in my college career, so that I could begin building the foundation for my business degree.
Okay, so you got a business degree at Chapman. Were there any significant experiences maybe at Chapman that sort of helped you decide what to do next?
No, I wouldn't say anything at that point. Early on, when I was in junior high school, I was part of a program, sort of a pilot program. This is back in the early mid-'80s, where they started teaching us, working on computers, basic programming. So I was doing the basic programming in 7th and 8th grade. So that sort of put it in my head that I kind of thought I want to go into something that's more technology related.
Okay.
And especially as I went to college, and so few people even knew how to use a computer at that point in time. And I was on the internet, and I had access to libraries and research and everything else that I could do out of my house, because my father was always doing a lot of research for his field. So I always had access to that technology where most people at that point in time didn't. So I always knew that I really want to get into technology, and that just sort of was always something that kind of caught my eye.
Got it. Yeah, that makes sense. So you're noticing already that you can leverage technology just in school, and compared to people that aren't using computers, because back then.
Oh, yeah.
People didn't have that access to it. Okay, so then when you did you graduate at Chapman and then go immediately to your first job, and how did that process work?
Well, I graduated Chapman in about 3.5 years, so I went pretty hard and heavy in terms of the courses and everything, because I was playing soccer too at the time. So
Okay.
I went overseas to play soccer for an additional season after I graduated, and then came back and then decided that I wasn't going to have soccer as a career. So went in and got a job, and then at that point I was only considering the Bell Labs division of AT&T or IBM. Those were really the only two companies that I was even looking to get into.
And how did you even decide that? So you're out there, you're playing soccer. Were you thinking at a certain point in time that maybe soccer would be a career?
No, I didn't think I was good enough to really make a full career out of the soccer side of things. So I was over there. I was interested to, mostly, experience Europe and get out there, learn Spanish. I thought was important. That's why I went to Spain specifically. So I wanted to get those experiences in because I could, and they were, giving me a little bit of money, and I got a house and a car to live in. Or not the car, but the house, to at least have some sort of a lifestyle over there. So I did that for about a year.
That was a great opportunity.
Yeah.
Excellent. So you got to be in Spain for about a year after college. Yeah. Okay, and then you came back. So what made you come back and say, okay, these are the two companies that I'm interested in? I mean, what was your thought process?
Well, for the most part, I met a couple of guys who were from the United States, and I met them at a bar. And basically was talking to them, and they were putting in central office switching equipment, which is what everybody's phone lines would tie into at the time. And they were putting it and having to come out to Europe and trying to get their equipment there, and they were from AT&T. So basically, after talking to them, they kind of convinced me that if you want to get into the technology sector, because I expressed interest, they said, really, you've got to either get into IBM or AT&T. So that's sort of where that seed was planted. So when I came back, at the end of that time, that was it. I was going to IBM or AT&T. So,
I'm interested because this is kind of an approach that a lot of people who are successful at guiding their career tend to take. So people who aren't as successful, I've noticed, they'll just sort of randomly look for job openings and get into whatever. But the people that I've noticed that are successful tend to deliberately choose companies that they want to get into, and they don't really think in terms of, is there a job available? They think about, I'll figure out how to get in, but this is the company I want to be in because something about this company. And it sounds like you said, this is the industry that I'm interested in. These are the big players in the industry that I think I'm going to learn the most at or do the best at. And at that point, were you interested in making a lot of money, or were you the best at for what? The best learning experience? The best what?
No, I knew I wanted to get into the field, and then, and at the time in 1990, 91, there wasn't that many tech companies out there.
Okay.
There really wasn't that many opportunities available in that field. So I knew I wanted to get into it, number one. Number two, I also knew I wanted to start off in sales. And I sort of developed that desire through school. When I was studying at Chapman, they had salary scales that you could look up in the library. So initially I wanted to be a financial analyst. So my undergrad being in finance, I was thinking financial analyst, and then I'll go on, and after a while I'll start running a company at some point. So I've always had that desire to get in there and run a company. So then I went to the library and looked at salary scales, and the salary scale for financial analysts started at about 24,000, and then after 5 years it said 40 to 50 or 50 to 60. Then I looked at sales, and it said starting salary 40 to 50, and then after 3 years in the field being successful was like 80 to 100,000.
You're thinking,
so I thought, and also I was pretty introverted at the time, so I thought I really need to focus on getting kind of out of my introverted shell, be able to talk to people, be able to communicate better. So that was one of the things. I also thought that I really need to get out there in order to be a better communicator. And then the third thing that sort of tipped it over into the sales side is I read an article in Forbes or some magazine like that, and I remember one of the things that it mentioned is that the majority of CEOs all had business development or sales in their background. So that was the third reason that kind of pushed me over the edge, and I thought, wow, I really need to get into that field, and if I make money at it, that's great.
I love that thinking process, and thanks for sharing kind of the stepping through of it. What gave you the desire, when did you decide that you wanted to run a business?
I've always had it. I mean, even when I was a kid, I would sit there and we'd come up with short designs and board shorts and things like that for skateboarding. So then we would sit there and get these design patterns and try to make shorts and figure out how to mass produce them and things like that. So I've just always had sort of that streak in me of somewhat creative, somewhat entrepreneurial. I want to be kind of independent. I've always been a fairly independent thinker in that way.
So you knew kind of when you were young that whatever you were going to do in life, it was going to be your thing.
Yeah.
And it was probably going to be some type of business that you ran.
Yeah.
And so, okay, and so then they said most people who are running companies, they have a significant amount of their experience in business development or sales. So you decide to do that, but you're an introvert.
Correct.
And most people assume that extroverts are the natural salespeople in the world, and they're the ones that are going to be the best at sales. But you've experienced differently. So how did you, and most people who are introverts are petrified to get into sales, but you weren't. So how did you even think about going into sales? Did you feel an ounce of fear? And, you know, kind of what excited you about choosing that as a path?
Well, I guess I looked at going into sales more of an opportunity to develop an area of my personality and communications that really was, at that point in time, very underdeveloped.
Okay.
So to me, it was more of an opportunity. And then the great thing about getting my first job within the Bell Labs division of AT&T was that they had a very formal, very structured sales process. So for somebody like me who's very analytical and math and numbers and everything else, I was able to go through and learn all the tactics, the techniques, the questions, the phases of the sales cycle, and all of these things, and almost turn it, for me, into an analytical process, as opposed to what most people think are a natural-born salesperson is just somebody who's able to interface with people and talk to people, etc. And the other area that was good for me was that I went into a very technical sale, which was the technology sector and some of the communications technologies that were coming down at the time. And a lot of the people that worked at AT&T, they were just doing long distance. Well, now we have computer systems and multiplexers, and we started doing new technologies that were coming down the pipe, like packet switching and cell switching. So it was very, very technical in nature, which suited me very well, because I love to get up and read about it and learn the technologies and then go out and apply it to the customer and learn about what their problems are and how we might be able to solve those problems.
Yeah, and so what you did is you took kind of your brain, which is attuned to creating a system, and you applied that to sales, and you found out that you were able to systemize it and turn it into an analytical process.
Correct.
And I would actually argue, and you may agree with me, that a lot of people who are the best salespeople are not necessarily the most extroverted people. Doesn't mean that extroverted people are naturally bad or good or introverted, but a lot of introverts can really leverage that analytical side. There are two things I want to ask you. One is how you got the job at AT&T or Bell Labs at the time, because I think you had to be a salesperson to do that too, didn't you?
Correct. So in order to get the job there, and nobody even told this to me, I just kind of came up with it on my own, is I would call into IBM or AT&T into the local field offices and say, I'm looking for a new system, and then I would say, I want to talk to your top sales rep. And then the top sales rep would get on the phone, and then I would say, I'm sorry, I'm not really looking for the system, but I was wondering if you could just meet with me for lunch or a cup of coffee. I just want to talk about getting in to the field that you're in, and I wanted to talk a little bit about your experience within the organization. And everyone met with me, and then AT&T, and it was
nobody shut you down.
No, everyone met with me and talked to me. I think I only had one person in a field office that, he met me for a quick cup of coffee, and that was about it. But everybody met with me. Wow. And I just talked to them, and and then at that point they became my champion internally, and then they would go in and say, hey, you know what, we've got this person. And at the time, both of them were on hiring freezes. So they weren't even hiring because it was during the '91 recession. So they set me up, and then AT&T offered me an internship temporarily and said, look, we'll just put you on this internship for a period of time, and then if things work out, when we lift the hiring freeze, we'll bring you in. And the day the hiring freeze was lifted, I was hired.
That's amazing. So one of the things that I don't know if you caught, but I caught, is that Mark asked for information interviews. And he took the initiative to do that. So he called every single field office, and he somehow got himself in there to talk to the salespeople, and he didn't even know them. He cold called, but he got in and he asked them to just have a few minutes of their time to talk about their job. And that's what we ask most people in career transition to do, or who are looking for a job to do, is get out there and make contacts in the field. So did you have the confidence that you were going to get hired?
Yeah, I knew that's where I wanted to work, so I didn't even think about not working at one of those two facilities.
So you just decided that you were going to make it work?
Yeah.
And you decided how. Great, thanks. So you worked at AT&T for about how long?
About 4 or 5 years.
Okay, and then where did you go?
Then I went to a company called Williams Communications.
Okay, and you stayed in sales and business development there. Was there anything different about your job there?
It was going after larger accounts. At AT&T, it was very limited in terms of geography, so I was assigned to the Irvine area only, and I could only handle companies that had 200 employees or under. So it was a little bit more limited. At Williams, it was wide open. You can go after any company, any size, as long as they're looking to make purchases for the communication systems. That's their target market. So they were wide open. They were going after much larger accounts and opportunities at the time.
Okay, and was that exciting to you? Because it gave you just sort of, you sort of had a system now, you knew how to apply it. Now you were sort of less limited in how you could apply it. How did you use the system there?
Yeah, and one of the things that frustrated me a little bit at AT&T at the time is when I would turn really good numbers, what they would do is cut my territory in half and then give it to somebody else. And then I would redevelop the territory that I was given, and then once I got the numbers all up again, then they would divide my territory in half and give it to somebody else. So it's one of these things where as I would develop things and met new people, I kept getting my territory cut down. So when I went to Williams, having it wide open, I could then go after prospecting, and it was wide open to just about anybody that I wanted to go after.
Right, and you had a story about a big client that you landed at Williams. Yeah,
when I started, being in the Irvine area, I had always driven by the Toshiba facility out there, and I couldn't touch it while I was at AT&T because they had senior reps who handled that, and I was only up to 200. Toshiba had at the time about 5,000 employees. But once I went to Williams, I just always had this connection with that facility that I knew I was going to get in there and begin working with that organization. So,
and was it because it was big and you knew there was a lot of opportunity there?
Part of it, but I also just had a sense of it that I just kind of knew that there was some kind of a connection.
Okay.
So I started calling in, started meeting the people, and started getting appointments and meetings and talking to them. And then that turned into the largest account that Williams had ever had in the history of the company at that point.
That's awesome.
For my division, or my size of companies, which was basically medium-sized to large-sized companies.
Great. So this is an interesting characteristic. So you kind of get your sights on something, and then it's almost like heads down, no matter what it takes, I'm going to get in. Tell me more about that. So you hadn't talked to anybody at Toshiba, but you just kind of had the sense this is a client I want to get into.
Right. Well, I knew they had a lot of people there, and I knew that they were doing a lot of changes. They were acquiring new buildings. They were doing changes in their manufacturing process. So I know there was a lot of stuff going on, and the fact that it's all communications equipment, voicemails, computer networks, email, it just was starting at the time. So I knew there were a lot of applications that I could get in there, and I know that if I was given the opportunity to data gather and start finding out what's going on and how they're doing things, I knew that there was going to be opportunity for me at that facility.
So how did you start? What was your first step?
Just calling in to the IT department and just learning who's there, talking to some of the folks, and they sort of started me with somebody kind of isolated, smaller, and then as I worked with them, they introduced me to somebody else, and then ultimately introduced me to the IT manager, and then we started working very closely together.
So you kind of got a toehold with the first person who would talk to you. And did you just keep calling until somebody was willing to talk to you?
No, I didn't really have to too much. It was just a couple of calls, and then the initial meeting started, and then we went back and forth, and they wanted to kind of know what I knew, and we talked a little bit about my background and experience. And we clicked, and it went pretty quickly. I was within 5 or 6 months, but I was implementing my first systems over there.
Wow. Okay, so then huge client, huge opportunity. So I'm assuming now at this point, it's easy, you're making a lot of money for that time. How old were you around this time?
26.
26, making plenty of money.
The first question everybody asks me when I go and meet with them is, how old are you? But I knew I studied every day, communications equipment, data communications, data systems, data networks, telecommunications. Every day I'd spend an hour in the morning reading magazines, and at AT&T the great thing about working there is we could do computer-based training at the time, and I would do an hour before I went home of computer-based training on whatever the topic was. So
you just kept training yourself. No matter what it was that you were doing, you would learn. You would learn and master, learn and master, learn and master. And then you were telling me this story earlier that we don't have on camera, but how he would like to just jump into a country, travel somewhere where he didn't even know the language and sort of figure it all out. You want to just maybe elaborate on that a little bit?
Sure. I love to travel, but one of the aspects of traveling that I enjoy the most is just going to a foreign country, whether I'm going, by plane or train or whatever it might be, and just getting into a city that I am not familiar with at all, may not even speak the language, but getting in and just figuring and sorting everything out. That's always kind of been something that I've enjoyed doing, and I think that's one of the reasons why, especially at AT&T and Williams, I was always the guy that they would throw at troubled accounts. So when the account wasn't going well, I would get the call, and then I would take over the account, and I was the one who would always kind of jump in the middle of what was usually a mess and kind of straighten everything out. I liked it a lot at first, but then I began kind of resenting it a little bit because it took away from opportunity for easier revenue and opportunity for me, because I was spending so much time dealing with the troubled accounts, which usually would take about 6 months to kind of straighten out and get them to trust me and start working with me. And then I'm spending 6 months on this account just straightening it out, and you're not being compensated because they're not buying anything, they don't trust you, and everything's been broken. And now it's up to me to go fix it, and then it takes about 6 months to fix it, and then once you fix it, okay, we trust you now. Now we're going to start giving you opportunity for new systems, new buildings that we might have acquired, new divisions that we're going to get up and running. So then I would get the door open, but it was a lot of work to get to the point, and especially when you're on a commission-based job, you're not making any money until you're getting some of that commission.
It's interesting, as I'm listening to your stories, I'm sort of seeing kind of a key strength coming out. And for everyone, as you're doing your career exploration, one of the things to pay attention to is, what do you enjoy the most? How do you enjoy approaching problems? What do you, kind of, when are you in your element? And you can probably see, I see you light up when you start talking about this idea. And I'm going to use the country as a metaphor. So you go into this foreign country, you can't speak the language, you have no idea what the lay of the land is, and the thing that is exciting to you, that's interesting to you, is figuring it out. And you figure out the system, you figure out how everything works. My guess is there's efficiency in there too. You figure out how to get it all to work efficiency. Sure. And the reason I'm saying that is because the only thing that frustrated you about going into those difficult accounts is because it was taking your normally very efficient sales system and making it a little bit cumbersome, right? As soon as things get inefficient, it seems like you get a little bit frustrated because you want to make it efficient. So you applied this way of approaching the world very successfully at AT&T and then at this company, Williams. Then what did you do? Then what happened?
And then after that, I wanted to move on to something a little bit more challenging. And at the time, as what happened in AT&T, they restructured my commission because they felt I was making too much commission. So then they started restructuring my salary. So then at that point in time, I decided I'm going to make a break from this. And then I went for a regional position with a national data company called Convergent Communications.
Okay, and then I'm assuming that's sort of more of the same. You went in, you figured out the system, you did well. How long did that job last, and anything different or interesting about that one?
Yeah, no, what I learned a lot as a regional director, I went into the position having now sales reps and sales teams underneath me. I worked tightly with the director of technology. So I got a lot of good experience there. I worked on different type systems. So AT&T had their own communications equipment. Williams had their own communications equipment. This company was kind of independent, where I could go to anybody, whether it be Cisco, AT&T, or the Williams systems. I could go to all the different technologies, and then I can meet with a customer and say, oh, based on your needs, this is going to be the best solution for you.
Okay.
So I was able to pull that experience in. That was very helpful. And then the other thing that occurred there is that the company then went through a full IPO, so I got to experience the entire IPO process. So that was very, very beneficial.
Okay, good. And you had to manage people for the first time at Convergent?
Yeah, really. I would say I got a lot of management experience on at Williams, because the reality was, once I put in the recommendation and we moved forward with contracts on a solution, I pretty much would manage the team that would go in there. So I had multiple technicians, I had my own engineers assigned, so I had my own team built up. So really, it was almost like you're running your own company within the organization. And that's one of the great things about the sales arena, is that if you do, you know, some sales reps just say, no, once I sell it, I don't want to touch it, I want to go sell something else.
Right.
But other sales reps, and more of my type, I want to set something up and recommend my solutions, and then I want to see my solutions implemented, and I want to see the results of it. So I want to be there through the long haul. I don't just want to set up a system and then walk and let you deal with somebody else to implement it. I want to be there through the implementation process.
Okay, great. So you learned how to sort of run a team through a systemization process, then you went to Convergent, and then you kind of got the additional experience of being able to integrate all sorts of different technologies.
Right.
And then you also got to go through an IPO.
Correct.
So what happened after that?
And then after the IPO, I went traveling for a couple more years. Went through
Now
that.
this was because you got a lot of money at the IPO, so then you didn't have to work, really.
Right. I had an interest in the IPO, so I did well and went traveling for a couple of years. And then when I came back, I had a father of mine who was just starting up a company on his own, and things weren't going as smoothly as he liked, so he asked me to come help him, and asked him to just, at least at that point, just kind of help out with things at his facility.
Okay, and did you do that then?
I did.
You started? Okay, and has that been where you've been ever since?
Correct.
Okay, great. So Mark, one final question. A lot of people who are watching these videos, they're kind of browsing around looking for what would be a fulfilling career, what they should do with their lives. They might feel a little bit lost and stuck. And you know, you're not done with your career yet, but you've had a lot of successful jobs, you've run a couple of businesses. You're now to a point where, for the most part, you can do what you want to do, right? What would you say has given you the most fulfillment, the most excitement? What has been the most interesting to you through all this? Like, what has made it all worth it for you?
I guess from my perspective, I just have a love of learning. So I went from the technology sector to gaining experience in managing people in the technology arena. Currently, the company that I have now, Mesa, handles mixing of chemicals, so it's all chemistry at this point. Didn't know anything about chemistry, but gosh, I had cracked the books and read and learned a whole lot about it. So really, from my perspective, I love learning. That was one of the reasons why the technology sector was great to me, because I'd get up and I'd read an hour in the morning, I would look at videos and computer-based training in the evenings before I'd go. I'd put about 2 hours into just learning about the field, and now in chemistry it was an entirely new challenge, so it was about learning chemistry and everything else. So from my perspective, I think what gives me the most fulfillment is, you know, really learning, and that gives a lot of fulfillment. And then the other thing is, I've always been on, you know, kind of the sales and marketing development side, and I think I've always worked with products and platforms that really provide a lot of help and value. So I think the other thing from my perspective is, you know, although the learning is kind of something that satisfies me internally, the other thing that I really enjoy is going out and truly helping people and individuals, whether it's my employees, my internal customers, my external customers out there. I really believe that we bring a lot of value to the customers, solve a lot of problems, and take away a lot of their heartache when they deal with us, because we make it very easy, high-level service for the customer. So I really believe I provide a lot of value and a lot of service to people, and I think that's why they keep coming back. Yeah, and I can hear when you're talking how that's fulfilling to you. So you sort of, you know, kind of think about what really fulfills you internally, but also the way you like to contribute to others.
Any last words that you might give as advice to young people trying to figure out what in the world they want to do with their life?
Hopefully things will open up to you, you know, and really you have to kind of look into yourself. What are the things that make you feel good? What are the things that interest you? And really try to figure out, based on yourself, what might be a good fit in terms of a career or opportunities for you. And I'd suggest, because even when I was in high school, one of the things I did, because initially I wanted to get into be an architect. Until I started meeting architects in the field, I'd actually go and actually meet people out in the field. I'd call up some firms and meet with them, and the way they described their daily job and the opportunities in the market and everything else made me completely change from going into architecture, but going into business instead. So that was kind of a major pivot point for me in my life.
That's such great advice, and that's what you guys are doing now by watching these videos, is just kind of getting a feel for different kind of careers and what would be a good fit for you. I'd like to thank you so much for your time.
Sure.
It's, you know, what we're doing for people by just giving them access to someone who's kind of on the nearing the end of their career, and just really sharing all their stories.
Sure.
Is so beneficial to everyone.
Well, I hope it helps.
Thank you so much.